So I'm really, really thrilled to be here in person and presenting with one of my favorite people in the world, Bonnetta Adeeb, whose face you unfortunately can't see if you're in the room, but she's smiling broadly on Zoom. And Bonnetta, I'm going to pass it over to you to kick things off and explain what we're going to be talking about today, too.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. So we're coming here to talk about this work of Ujamaa Cooperative Farming Alliance. It feels a lot like things I've experienced before. It feels like having a baby, you know, all the excitement that comes with a new baby and watching that baby grow. But it also feels like I've found a pot of gold. I have stumbled across an amazing group of people who share beliefs in the possibilities of what can happen and what is happening. And that is the story of seeds, the power of seeds. And I listened to the introduction, so it sounds like we have a whole bunch of seed lovers or seed huggers, whatever y'all want to call yourselves in this space. So you could learn more about us at ujamaaseeds.com and go on to the next slide, Nick.
One moment. Let's see if I click here now. There we go. All right.
So these are some of our administrative team. One of the things we're really attempting to do is to provide opportunities. Our mission is to increase the number of minority and underserved wait a minute, that's not it. To grow the number of BIPOC seed farmers. And we started out with this beautiful vision of how to bring this information, restore the love and respect of the culture of agriculture to our communities with this, our nonprofit that's called STEAMonward.org. STEAM Onward is an organization whose mission is to increase the number of minority and underserved youth that enter STEM careers. What we found out through our work, however, is that everything you'd ever dream of doing, you can do in agriculture. So some of these youth here want to go into medicine, some wanted to do computer science, some wanted to do art, poetry. But through that, we found that all of it could be done in the garden. And at the same time, we could build on improving the state of health of our community. In Southern Maryland, where we started this work, we had very high rates of cancer, high blood pressure, heart disease, some of the worst rates in the country. And so, as we began to find community-based solutions, we came up with the idea of working on growing food. And because 80% of disease can be treated with an improvement in the diet, you get the exercise, you get fresh air, you're out there learning and working within the environment, restoring that community, that opportunity to serve, and also providing for you and your family sustenance and reconnecting with your traditions. And so it turned out that gardening and farming was the way for us to our vision for creating a healthier community. Next slide. Nate, can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm trying.
Okay.
It's finicky.
So, so though I was working with middle and high school, college kids, and they came up with this idea that we could support our work by starting an online store. That online store would be selling starts, native fruit, nuts, and berries, and seeds. COVID came along, however, and shut down the business that these kids had worked on for years. And just as all hope appeared to have disappeared, we found out about the Cooperative Gardens Commission, which started during at the beginning of COVID as a call to action for communities to help feed people because throughout the country there were tremendous areas of food insecurity. We were watching, we knew that hunger was coming at us, and every our greatest fears came about during COVID. But a group of citizens, Nate being one of them, me being another, I came together to form the Cooperative Gardens Commission. And the goal was to get heirloom varieties of seeds into the hands of the most needy people who have who believe that they could help to feed their communities. And so we built up a nationwide network called the Cooperative Gardens, and it's still going on. We just launched our 5th year of based on donations of free heirloom seeds that came from the organic seed industry. And so that was the beginning of us working across, the country, looking at what we could do to support people, be they in Berkeley or being there in New Orleans or wherever they were, helping to feed their communities. And so this was really essential work for us to develop a system that allowed us to distribute seeds. They came in into our seed hub in Philly, and about 100 volunteers came across the country, came in to pack those seeds, and they were distributed to the centers around the country. See, there were quite a few in the Bay Area, not so much in the middle of the United States, but certainly east of the Mississippi and on the West Coast. We were able to eventually support um, about 350 seed hubs, and also to help about 100,000 families. So this work is still going on. If you're interested and you believe that you can be instrumental in helping people to help themselves by growing their own food, if you reach coopgardens.org, you can apply for an application to become a seed hub in your community and to help distribute free seeds. So this work that we realized food was medicine. Go back to that slide just one more time, and let's talk about food as medicine, because more and more people are coming to believe that the that the plants and the things we eat are more than just, something to fill your belly. They're also something to heal you. Historically, that was the role of food. And so I just wanted to show you, our kids started these things called pharmacy gardens all over the region with the idea that food was medicine. And we were able to get a lot of support from the health community, even hospitals. Communities around the country believe that we should rethink what food means to us and the way we access quality food. Now go on, Nate, if you can. So, Nate, why don't you talk about this slide?
Sure. So we're gonna shift and start talking about how Ujamaa itself came to be, and a big part of that was while we were doing the free seed distribution with Cooperative Gardens Commission, we realized that so many of the seeds that people were requesting from the communities that were asking for seed were seeds that we didn't have. People were asking for culturally meaningful seeds from their communities, and we were relying on donations from the organic seed industry. So we were getting whatever Fedco and Johnny's and Adaptive and other companies had excess of. So we ended up with a lot of lettuce and Swiss chard and radishes and carrots, and we didn't have very much okra or collard greens or black-eyed peas or sorghum, and these were things that people were asking us for. So we ended up buying some of those seeds to make sure we had enough to meet the needs. But pretty early on, we realized, well, we've got these groups of people in Maryland, groups of farmers coming together through Ujamaa, and why not start producing the seeds that we have a lack of for the free seed distribution? And then that sort of that conversation got bigger. On the left, you can just see some sorghum from one of our events a few years ago.
So, in order for us to provide the needs for our community, we had to move to farming. We had to start farming. And sorghum was the first crop that we successfully farmed because under COVID restrictions, the young kids were not able to leave their homes. So they packed seeds, they broke up the large donations into small seeds. But our college students were considered by the state of Maryland as essential workers. So they were able to go out and they learned to farm seeds. Nate came down from New Jersey down to Maryland, and we were successfully able to produce our first crop. So initially, we had one grower who said, we really need to get this information out. He was a guy by the name of Paul Lovelace that was working at a historical foundation. And then we had two growers, and then we were up to seven. And then Nate says, let's do this. So we came together and we started working as a cooperative with the idea that many farmers were working alone and they were isolated. And BIPOC farmers were particularly struggling in many ways, not just to make their farms work for them, because most BIPOC growers are working full-time jobs and farming at night and weekends, but just the work it takes to be a farmer. It thrives on the community. So our goal was to bring this whole concept of community farming, building coalitions, working together, collective working, which is historically the way that our communities farmed, is to reinstitute that.
Now, I put a slide in here that it's a little bit hard to read, but this is a document that we created about 3 years ago exactly, in advance of a meeting that we set up between Ujamaa organizers and folks from primarily the organic seed industry. There were folks from companies all across the country who came to this first meeting that we had, where we basically came to these seed companies and said, listen, we're trying to create a BIPOC-led cooperative that is going to make the seed industry more equitable, because the vast majority of seed companies in this country are run by white folks. The farmers who are growing the seeds are white folks, and it is. You got an idea? Oh, okay.
Well, I want to say that Organic Seed Alliance was in that meeting. Y'all were there at the beginning.
So we wanted to bring these companies together and give them an opportunity to support this work and to build a relationship. Sorry, I'm going to hold the mic here. Does that sound better?
That sounds great. Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, it was
loud
not
and
bad
clear.
before. You're good.
All right, cool. So yeah, basically we went and asked for money from these seed companies, and not just saying, hey, this is you're part of an unjust system. We're trying to make it more equal. You owe us some money. We wanted to say, we're here to build long-term reciprocal relationships, because we're trying to make this something that is going to last for a really long time. And now 3 years later, it's pretty amazing to see where Ujamaa has come from this moment when we sort of went and said, we're starting from scratch. Can you help us out? We raised about $50,000 from that early appeal. And we've developed relationships with a lot of these seed companies. Some of them, Ujamaa growers, are now producing seed for their catalogs as well. Ujamaa has our third catalog as well. Sorry. Sure, I can read this aloud. I'll just read the summary part. This document sets forth a handful of modest requests of leaders in the organic and small-scale seed movement who run successful seed companies. These requests relate to both a specific new project, a Black-led seed growers cooperative, and a broader and even more significant purpose, honoring the pivotal role of agriculturists from Black, Indigenous, and diasporic communities in U.S. food and farming history and their ongoing painful struggles by providing long-term support for growers from historically oppressed and marginalized communities. We went on with it was about a 3 or 4 page document, but I'd be happy to share that with you and at some point.
Sure. This like I said, it's a living document, but we can definitely share it with you.
So yeah, Ujamaa has from the base in Bonita's house. Really, it's where the seed company has started. Um, in Southern Maryland. This is the Accokeek Center, Accokeek Foundation, a few miles from Bonneta's house, which has hosted a number of Ujamaa gatherings. This is the gathering we just had in November. We've got people coming from really all over the East Coast, from the Midwest, and we're doing our best to expand. We had a few people who flew in actually from the West Coast as well. But this is some of our leadership. Chris Keeve in the middle, who's a PhD student at University of Kentucky. Justice Madden on the left is a student at Virginia Tech, and Fatima Hassan on the right is one of the co-founders with Bonnetta.
Let me just say that slide, back 2 slides, let's just show that for a second, because I think it's the dream of Ujamaa. Is what we are doing in this slide is we're actually rematriating back to the Piscataway Conoy tribal community those rare seeds that we found, Piscataway beans, that had been lost to them. They did not know of their existence, but through our network of growers and seed savers, we were able to produce enough seed to get seed back to the tribal communities. And to my great pride and honor, Piscataway community will be farming culturally meaningful seeds, their own Piscataway beans, this year. So this is a great honor, and it is the best example of the vision that Ujamaa has for all communities in need and all communities that are under attack. They're historically oppressed. Last year we grew for the Ukrainian community. This year our focus is on the Palestinian Heritage Library to support them. But it's an important part of the work that we do, and it speaks to our heart.
Yeah, we'll be talking some more about some of those specific cases, but this photo shows some. Garrett on the left is a professor at American. She's processing some Iraqi basil seeds, and Paul, her husband, who Bonnetta mentioned, is processing an Afghan squash we had him grow. And that was on the left. There's me with Vivian Sansor from the Palestine Heirloom Seed Library. She was at that convening 2 years ago, and we brought a sorghum mill down to one of the early Ujamaa gatherings. The thing sort of rides up unless you have weight on top, so that's why we have to have somebody riding around it. But it's good fun too.
Yeah, that's a 2-horse mill, and you see what we use for horses. We had some. We are the horses that provide the 2-horse mill.
And we had an evaporator pan I drove to Kentucky to pick up, and turned out it really needed a deep cleaning. So the sorghum we tried to make on it was terrible, but we boiled some in a big pot, and that turned out really well.
Y'all will probably recognize Mama Iris there leading the way. She is another one of the original grannies, and she calls herself the godmother for Ujamaa, and has really helped us navigate all through our learning curve. As has my beautiful nephew, Nate Kleinman, who's been there for us. We're cleaning sweet potatoes. That's 5 varieties of sweet potatoes that were grown in a bag.
The sorghum processing again. We had last year we had a spring convening in Kentucky at Berea College at their forestry center. We somehow ended up having a personalized message from Al Gore, he's a regenerative farmer in Tennessee now, if you didn't know that. Who knew? Indeed.
Yeah, that video is up on our website if you want to see it in Ujamaa Farms under media mentions. It's really heart-touching, and it's really exciting for us to see that people of all stripes seem to feel that the work, is worth a mention. So we hope that at the end of this, you see your role in seed saving, and possibly working with us as we move forward. This is again my basement. That used to be a man cave. Now it's a seed packing store. Luckily, my husband has relinquished his space. It looks nothing like that now. It's completely overtaken by seeds, and we just are putting in a large refrigeration unit because, as you know, seeds can they grow. They will take over your life.
Experimental Farm Network, our seed company, also started in a basement. Actually, we had like 3 basements before we finally ended up upstairs in a building. Took us about 5 years to get out of the basement. The seed packets were designed by one of Bonneta's former students, who's one of the younger members of Ujamaa. That's Bonneta's husband Hassan there, showing off the inventory. And yeah, you can see this was just a picture on the right was a picture I snapped while sitting in their living room one day, going through some seeds that we got from the USDA, which I'm going to talk later more about today at 4 o'clock. On the left, those are some seasoning peppers. They look like spicy peppers, but they're not, from St. Croix. That's Bonnetta in her garden. Ujamaa started farming a couple of years ago on a piece of property called Taman Field that is owned by a church. The church is up the hill across the street, and Taman is allowing the farmers of Ujamaa who only have gardens, who have small amounts of land, to really work together and expand on a larger scale. It also has this big, beautiful barn that was great once the vultures left. And this was I included this just to show that we spent a lot of time on Zoom. We were out there visiting the farming, and then Bonnetta and I had to jump on a Zoom call. Ujamaa, because we are a cooperative and we have people around the country, we organize primarily via Zoom. So some days we're on 3-4 Zooms a day. Especially the first and third weeks of any month. But we wanted to highlight a few projects that we're working on that are things that you all could get involved in. And we hope that you will consider that. Do you want to talk about the Heirloom Collard Project, Bonnetta, a little bit?
I do, because and last year I met some people from California. I'm hoping to hook up with you guys again to talk about some Ethiopian collards. One of the things that we realized was there was a project called the Heirloom Collard Project. Y'all are all welcome to go on and see the work we've been doing. We have recipes and all that. There's a beautiful film that talks about the history of this project. But eventually what happened was that because of the Great Migration, when African Americans fled the South, many times they were not able to take seeds with them. The seeds, the people who stayed back in the South, some of them still had their gardens, but basically, the whole notion of a family having their own variety had begun to age out. So these gentlemen, scientists from Grin, from the government, as well as a history professor, traveled the South, and they were able to find about 120 varieties of seeds being stewarded mostly by elders whose children were no longer interested in growing, gardening, and all that. So they collected these samples, and Mama Ira found out that they were languishing in what I call seed jail, which is Grin. And so, with the help of uh, Seed Savers Exchange, Southern Exposure, and Melanie Edwards, and many others, we were able to grow out these varieties. So eventually it came down to these 21 varieties that we call the Ultra Cross. So the idea was first that are these seeds viable? What exactly are these? But what we realized was that they were some of the most beautiful plants you'd ever seen. And so many people volunteered to grow out the whole variety. And this is what it looks like when you grow out the whole thing. It's about 500 collard. And if you could see up close, the biodiversity that came from this cross was unbelievable. pink ones and blue ones, and some are tall, some are shiny. So all of these beautiful crops came out of that. And so it turned out that an experiment went right that time. And we have what's called the ultra cross. So if any of you have the opportunity to want to learn more about seed breeding on a crop that represents so much importance to many different communities, African American crop developed from a wild European crops that were growing throughout the southern states. These varieties are available. So the Ultra Cross is both a crop that you could buy from us, it's a seed you buy, but more importantly, it's what I call a gateway crop, or I whisper to my friends, it's sort of a gateway drug, because once you get hooked on collard greens, you have to have them. So it's one of those enduring traditions, and we have found that it means something to people. Collard greens have significance. And so we have been able to develop systems and structures around reclaiming our agricultural heritage with this mixture that we call the Ultra Cross. So Nate had shown you another Ultra Cross mix we have, which is the Ultra Cross okra, which is similar, except there's even more biodiversity in this group. There are 85 mothers, I call them mothers, all the individual crops. You see how vast they are. But when all of these mix, they create new varieties that we believe will represent where we're going in the future around regional adaptation and growing for climate change. So go on and Nate.
Sure.
The next.
So yeah,
You
well,
wanna go?
I just was going to say one thing first, just to shout out the Utopian Seed Project. You can see they wrote their name on the corner there. They created these ultra crosses. So they grew 21 of these heirloom collards all together, crossed them together, and that's what we call the ultra cross. Then the okra, they did the same with 85 different varieties. Most of these came from the USDA. You heard Bonnetta refer to it as GRIN. That's the Germplasm Resources Information Network, which is the name of the government website where you get the seeds. And I'm going to talk all about it today at 4:00. But that's GRIN is sort of shorthand for the National Plant Germplasm System, which is the broader umbrella for the system that we use to get those seeds out.
And our dear friend Chris Smith wrote the whole okra, which is really goes into detail about the ways to use it. This Nanticoke squash to me is the best example I have to show you about biodiversity within a landrace. And this is one crop. It is from a tribal community here in the DMV, but this is what you get when you plant this crop out. Go ahead, Nate.
So yeah, the Nanticoke people live historically are from the eastern shore of Maryland, southern Delaware. They now live as well in southern New Jersey, where really right around where I live. They are an Algonquian-speaking people. Their language went extinct in about 1850. That's when the last native speaker passed. But they're one of the peoples who most of them never left the area. They kind of went underground, and they are like the Piscataway people. They are a triracial group. They have African ancestry, European ancestry, and indigenous ancestry. But they through displacement and assimilation and years in hiding. I've spoken to elders who are still alive today who were taught not to tell anyone that they're indigenous when they were young. They lost the connection to this squash, and it's a cool story. We got this originally. I got it about 15 years ago from Seed Savers Exchange. It was a seed in the Seed Savers vault, so it wasn't being sold by the company, but it was offered if you requested seed for it. according to their records, they got it from the Abundant Life Foundation, which of course is now Organic Seed Alliance, it disappeared and Organic Seed Alliance came to be. I don't know exactly how that happened. But the records of the Abundant Life Foundation were lost in a big fire. So we don't know where they got this squash from. All we know is that they called it Nanticoke Indian squash. But it's a really, really beautiful, beautiful landrace. And being from the Chesapeake, Delaware Bay regions, you can imagine that in the 1600s, 1700s, 1800s, that area was a major center of global trade. And these squash can keep for 18 months, even 2 years unrefrigerated. So a landrace like this probably helped to push winter squash like this around the world. So what we now consider, heirloom squash from Australia, from France, from Turkey, wherever, from Japan. So many of these heirlooms came from diverse populations like this. You can see ones that look like a Turk's turban squash or like a kabocha squash or Jarrahdale. Some of these old heirlooms. So I've worked for years to find some Nanticoke folks who were interested in taking on the squash, and I spoke with the chief of the Nanticoke, Lenny Lenape, in southern New Jersey quite a few times, and it just wasn't the man who I spoke to then, the chief at that time, said, well, we don't really have farmers anymore. He didn't think anybody was interested. But then right at the beginning of the pandemic, I was contacted by the woman on the left, Corey Ridgway. And she said, I just found out there's a Nanticoke squash. I'm Nanticoke. I did a Google search and I found that you have the seeds and you're the only people who are selling it. And I said, great, I'll bring you some tomorrow. So we met up at their house. I gave them a bunch of not just Nanticoke seeds, but other Lenape seeds. At this point, the tribes have sort of merged in South Jersey, Lenape and Nanticoke. So I had Lenape corn and beans to share as well. And they were, her husband Yuri was on the tribal council. Last winter, he was elected, or 2 winters ago now, he was elected chief of the tribe. So now we have someone who as the chief, who really values, really cares about this history and is working actively to restore not just the squash, but the practices around it to their people. And the Nanticoke have other branches in Delaware, and we're working with Courtney Street on the left, who's the founder of Native Roots Farm Foundation. She's Nanticoke, and she started this organization in order to preserve land. The southern Delaware is one of the fastest growing places. They're the fastest developing parts of the country. They're taking farmland and paving it over and putting tract housing on it left and right. And she saw land that was in her family for generations with a for sale sign on it. And it woke her up. She quit her job as a news producer for CBS News in New York City and moved with her husband back to Delaware. And they have they're working now to raise money to buy land, and also doing amazing cultural programming to help educate people in the community about their crops. And this was a really fun event in the fall in Wilmington, Delaware. They had a celebration of the Nanticoke squash, and Courtney invited Bonnetta and me to come. And Courtney surprised me by giving me a packet of seeds that I had given her from a calendula that came from Odessa, Ukraine, where my ancestors came from. So it was a real full circle moment that we were able to exchange those seeds. You can see I'm holding that calendula from her garden. I'd given her a handful, and I told her that I had almost a crop failure. So she brought me a nice big bag full of seeds, and we're selling those in our catalog this year. Another story related to seed rematriation in the Delaware Valley. This is Sylvia Davitz. Do any of you know Sylvia? Sylvia ran a company called Solstice Seeds in Vermont, and She's a really, really wonderful seed saver. And as far as I knew, she was the last person who had, she hosted us over the summer and had a really wonderful, wonderful meal there. Her garden is spectacular. These like terraced stone walls, just beautiful. She introduced us to the Muncie wampum bean, which is an heirloom Lenape bean that had fallen to really close to extinction. As far as we knew, it was only in her hands and a handful with the Roughwood Seed Collection where she got it in Pennsylvania. They're now offering it in their catalog. Roughwood is this year for the first time, and Solstice doesn't offer it anymore, but we're hoping to scale it up. So you can, I don't know if you can see, but the bean is sort of a tan color with purple striping on it. So the color scheme mimics the wampum shells, the purple and white of the wampum shells, which are culturally super important to Eastern peoples. So just broadly speaking, this is we like to just put this slide to demonstrate the loss of biodiversity over the last century. You can see like 497 lettuce varieties were present in 1903 in a sampling of commercial seed catalogs. And then 80 years later, only 36 of those listed lettuce varieties were available in the USDA collection. And you can see really the loss has been staggering in a number of different crops. So we've talked about sorghum already a little bit. For those who aren't familiar with sorghum, sorghum is an African crop. It was developed in East Africa, probably Ethiopia, South Sudan, Somalia is where it was domesticated. And it's gluten-free, so it's becoming more popular, and it has a very mild flavor. It's really delicious. You can eat it like rice. You can pop it like popcorn. You can press the stalk for sugar, of many varieties anyway. Super drought tolerant. It only needs about 1/6 of the water as corn. So moving into the future, sorghum has huge potential to be really important for humanity with the changing climate. We're working on breeding some perennial sorghum as well, which is very exciting. And there's only a few dozen perennial sorghums in the government system, but yeah, that's popped sorghum. I mean, it pops just like popcorn. This is the sorghum press. That is the Kentucky cane mill that I got from, we had to drive to Missouri to pick that thing up. That's the raw juice, which is really tasty. Boiled down, makes this dark molasses-like syrup. That's just a little bit of the diversity of sorghum that exists. Most of these are African. There's one from India. And then the experimental perennial one is in the middle. You can see it's a bit lighter, not nearly as dense. This is the wild Johnson grass, which you may be familiar with as a weed. It is a perennial sorghum relative, and when crossed with sorghum, can create this perennial. But it's going to take some work to make it really reliably perennial in places that get as cold as even New Jersey. We're zone 7. But we put these slides in here to talk a little bit about the government seed system, which again, I'm going to talk more about this afternoon, but sorghum is one of the most well-represented plants in the government system. There are 46,491 different sorghums in the government collection. But when you go online, for the average person, it says that these are available to professional plant breeders and other career research scientists, and that non-credentialed requesters face automatic rejection or otherwise must provide proof of affiliation or professional status. So these are things that were collected by the government from around the world, from communities where they were bred, where they were developed. And yet now the descendants of those people don't have access to those seeds unless they know how to game the system, basically. We asked the question, why should corporations have full access to these seeds while the descendants of the people who develop them have no access? This ties into the policy work that we're starting to embark on with Ujamaa, which I'll talk more about in a bit. Bonnetta, do you want to talk a little bit about the wild crops here?
Yeah, this is super important. One of the things that was happening with me, I was working with high school kids, and we got a grant from the Fruit Tree Planting Foundation to plant out orchards. And they wanted to put fruits out in the communities. They actually donate fruit orchards around the world with the idea that children had gotten to the point where they could not identify native fruit. They didn't know what a peach looked like, or they didn't understand that it came from a tree. So we started out with this beautiful orchard, but it wasn't long before we realized that blight was going to come, that the cold was going to kill things, and that I think about a third of the trees died in the first year. Then they passed a law saying that teachers, nobody without a certification could use the fungicides, the sprays, the chemicals that were required to keep those domestic trees. So one of our partners, which is the U.S. Forest Service, says that we need to replace them with wild fruit. There's native fruit from this region that doesn't require any of that's already adapted, that is disease resistant, and those are the things that we should place this with. So we started looking for native fruit, nuts, and berries, and we realized people were really interested in this. And so we dedicated that effort to who I call the Martin Luther King of fruit, which is Dr. Wangari Maathai from Kenya, the famous leader of the Greenbelt Foundation that planted over 40 million trees in her lifetime. So this is the work that we think again is culturally relevant, it's meaningful. It helps to reconnect people to the woods and to native lands and gives them, hopefully, with this work, will help people rediscover their connectedness, where our medicinals come from, where so much of our food comes from, but also sacred places and important places. So while stone fruit is one of the things that's most one of the best ways to begin this process, we also will be talking about the 7 layers of the food forest. But in every garden, some plants, these small shrubs, something can grow. So we want to incorporate more fruit and wild fruit into all of our growing landscapes.
Yeah, so the stone fruits are a really interesting example because historically these were really, really important foods for indigenous people across Eastern North America, and as I understand it, Western as well, but I don't know as much about life here. In New Jersey, we have beach plums. These are beach plums. They're smaller than a cherry. They grow right out of the sand dunes. They're incredibly resilient. You can plant them away from the sand dune, and they'll do pretty well as well. But like Bonnetta said, they are totally adapted to the area. I can't put a Burbank plum or any kind of European plum or Japanese plum in the ground and expect it to just produce beautiful fruit without serious interventions. We have we have pests that will destroy every single fruit if they even develop. But these beach plums, I don't have to do anything, and they produce every year. It's really beautiful. And beach plums are just one species. So you can see on this slide here, there are only 7 beach plums in the USDA collection. They only have one eastern sand cherry, Prunus pumila from Maine, even though that plant has a massive range and it's in dozens of states. Same with the hog plum, Prunus umbellata, only one from Arkansas. So these plums, which used to be a really important part of the landscape, were something that existed in large numbers, and they spread across the continent because indigenous people were spreading them, and because they were managing the land with fire and in concert with large grazers, including bison, even as far as New Jersey. There were bison in North Jersey. Pennsylvania was full of bison. The Southeast also full of bison. So, you know, because the way the landscape has been managed over the last 2 centuries, these plants are going extinct in the wild. It's really, really hard to find native plums in the wild in the East these days. I can't say I even know any place where the Eastern sand cherry exists, or the hog plum, or Prunus americana, the American plum, is also incredibly hard to find these days. And so we're hoping, and we're working already to identify where some of these last populations exist, and to try and preserve them, and to convince the USDA to fund actually long-term preservation of these. It's not just important that they have 1,000 different apples from that are domesticated, but they don't have all of these important wild plants, many of which also underwent some domestication by indigenous people, but that hasn't been recognized by modern scientists. And it's only beginning. They're only starting to. That some of these wild populations that exist are being recognized as anthropogenic populations, places that people planted them. There's the sand cherry. Another one of these plants that's not a fruit, but was once super important, is the American groundnut, or hopness is the Lenape name. Apios americana is a legume. It's a perennial that produces beans that you can eat like beans. But the main event is these underground tubers that are protein rich and really delicious. Yeah, a nitrogen fixing perennial starchy tuber is just a totally unique thing. We don't have other plants like that that produce this many calories and that are so easy to grow. And again, this is one that the USDA doesn't have any of this in the collection that's publicly accessible. They have some in a collection at Iowa State that if you know they have them, if you know the curator, you can ask for it, but it's not searchable like all the other stuff. Steve Cannon, Iowa State University. He's a really good guy. He's picking up on the work of a professor named William Blackman, who was down in Louisiana and is now retired and lives in Virginia. Dr. Blackman created, I think, 45 selected varieties of hopness from a couple thousand seedlings, and some of those are still circulating. They're still around. We started selling them at EFN this year, selling some tubers, but we're also selling seeds, true seed from New Jersey, so that people can breed some of their own new varieties. Every time you plant a seed of a clonally propagated crop, you get a unique genetic combination, so it could be a new variety. Another one that
I just want to say about these amazing crops. This used to be the work of everyday families. They would go out looking for native plants. They were commonly eaten. So this is a super important part of reclaiming our agricultural heritage, is the idea of foraging and understanding that certainly something that was shared between indigenous and Black communities was the location of all these crops. It's important work. And it's essential, really, that we reclaim these skills. I just want to say that this actually right here is the most beautiful vegetable I can think of. Please look at that. That is kale. That is gorgeous. And that is biodiversity on steroids.
So this is a product of the West Coast. This perennial kale. These pictures are for one that we call Homesteader's Kaleidoscopic Perennial Kale Grex. It's a mouthful. That's something that Chris Homanix gave to it. Chris is a plant breeder who was based in Oregon. Now he's based in Washington, and he got really from one chance cross that happened in Wales between purple tree collards, which is from California, It's actually originally from Europe, but it is an heirloom associated primarily with the Richmond, California area. And Daubenton kale, which is a forage kale from France. These two crossed together in a garden in Wales, and there were other brassicas blooming at the same time. So it started this beautiful population of unbelievable perennial kales. And again, this is one perennial kale has got huge potential as a source of calories and as a way to be sequestering carbon in the ground by growing a perennial instead of an annual. But it's one that is increasingly hard to find. The USDA has one accession of Brassica oleracea ramosa, which is the Latin word for perennial kales. And so with this mix, we're trying to release huge diversity out there and get people experimenting with it, adapting perennial kales to their areas. And it isn't just here that was important. We've learned about this green collared tree, they call it, from South Carolina, Gullah Geechee heirloom, and really beautiful. But so we've developed a few planks to a platform about ways to improve the national plant germplasm system, including funding, actually using the system to fund rematriation of these seeds, returning these seeds to the communities where they came from and where they were taken by the U.S. government over the last 100 years. There are over 600,000 different seeds in the U.S. government collection, and the vast majority of them come from another country. So returning those, making sure that the communities where they came from have access to them would be a massive undertaking, and it's something that really the government, only government funding could make that happen at the scale that it needs to happen. So we're urging them to work with the Department of State and create such a program. We're looking for them to massively increase spending so they can fully staff and maintain existing collections around the country. If you visit some of these research stations, often they're on these big, beautiful campuses, but they have like 10% or 20% of the staff that the buildings were built to house. There's been such a lack of funding to this really critical thing, maybe the only really good thing that the government does, maybe the best thing anyway.
Certainly in our eyes.
We're asking them to prioritize crops for climate change adaptation and survival, especially perennial crops, land races, and crop wild relatives, and then to also create opportunities for germplasm collection trips led by BIPOC farmers. The government still funds scholars, researchers going around the country and collecting seeds.
And around the world.
Around the world.
Yeah, they have teams that go out and do this work.
But what we're urging is that they expand who gets to go on these trips. Who do they fund, so that culturally meaningful seeds from crops that the scientists don't think are important but communities know are, can actually be collected as well. And more broadly, so that we can develop a non-extractive model for how to do this kind of seed collection. Because there are ways to do this in a really reciprocal way, where the people who are giving the seeds actually get compensation, and not just maybe a one-time payment, but long-term getting royalties from any seeds that are sold, being empowered to control the story so that it's not somebody else telling the story of their seed once the seeds are commercialized or made available in some other way. So that's a big part of the work that we're doing, and we're hoping to expand that work over the coming years.
Yeah, right now we have two young scholars. One is doing research on okra, doing incredible work, only to find out that people didn't even really know what okra was. I mean, it was very little research being done on the institutional level. Also, another one of our scholars is looking at the root systems of collard. And as he's doing his research, the people on his team have no experience with these crops that we consider culturally meaningful and are pretty well known around the region, but the study and the work, the resources have never been put into our culturally meaningful, many of our culturally meaningful seeds outside of soy and corn. You know, many of our crops have never been studied. So information about whether or not the root systems can do a good job of absorbing lead, so for phytoremediation, or whether this crop is better at withstanding pests than another one, or this one survives cold. That work is yet to be done. That's the kind of work that Ujamaa policy is really that we are focused on. We were successfully able to get a grant from the Union of Concerned Scientists, specifically to focus in on Farm Bill. Apparently, they believe that our work with culturally meaningful seeds and with BIPOC growers, people such as yourself, will help us to listen and be able to reach the community to find out really what their needs are. So, for that reason, we hope to bring more and more growers from these various communities in. We are hosting listening sessions and developing a format for finding out what the needs are and what our growers are interested in. Also, putting together training, and we did our first lobby activity last May. We were up on Capitol Hill, and we hope to join and continue to build coalitions. If you have coalitions that are interested in doing this kind of work, please reach out to us.
Yeah, one of the things that's really valuable about having the Ujamaa be based in the DMV, that is the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, for those not from there, is the proximity to Capitol Hill. And Bonita's been working for decades with members of Congress, and her congressman is Steny Hoyer, who's a a powerful force in Congress and has been for a long time. So there's we think that there's some leverage there. But we're working
there's interest, but we have to show up in numbers in order to prove our case that this really does matter to the people.
And part of what we're doing with this $100,000 grant is working to bring farmers to DC to advocate for things that are important to them. Because it's right now it's the big corporations that are having the most say in the process, as is typical. So we have a few other policy priorities that we've been working on, including banning utility patents on seeds, and bringing the U.S. into some international seed treaties, expanding access to land, equipment, et cetera, for first-time farmers, fostering growth of urban farming and agroforestry and ecology across BIPOC communities, and funding education on seed saving, plant breeding, and community seed banks. Bonita, do you want to talk about the oral history?
I just want to talk about this briefly. One of the people ask us, how do you identify what is culturally meaningful? And we do it by talking to elders. We started during COVID having these interviews with the elders, asking what their grandparents, what their ancestors grew. And that's was the way in which we began to develop our collection of what culturally meaningful seeds representing many ethnic communities. This is Mama Ira talking to a youngin. This young lady works at Spelman College, and that is she's in the midst of a garden that was started during World War I as a victory garden, and they're focusing in. They have a food science program. So our goal is to collect the stories of elders. If you have someone who is interested in telling their story, important story that should not be lost. COVID robbed us of a lot of our elders, and we want to capture those stories. At the bottom of the screen at Heirloom Garden Program, down there, you can click on that, and you can sign up to be considered for an interview. We're attempting to expand the program right now. We're east of the Mississippi, but we know there's important stories that should be captured for posterity. So there's a video that you can see. I don't think we have time to show it, right? There's a trailer, Nate, a 3-minute trailer there that you can see that talks about the project?
So yeah, this project is a collaboration between Ujamaa, Spelman College, and Princeton University. So you can see the website address there is heirloomgardens.princeton.edu. If you want to learn more about that. Ujama's also been working on developing some regular publications. This is the first issue of the Seedcast from December, and this just came out, our first glossy magazine. Although I think that right now it only exists as a PDF, but it will be a glossy printed thing one of these days. Virtually glossy, we'll call it.
So this contains stories. This is a quarterly that contains stories and information. Is and then the catalog also exists within it, our 2024 catalog. So if you're interested in learning more about the growers and the work we're doing, then Ujamaa Farms. If you're interested in ordering seeds, you can go to Ujamaa Seeds, and then you can download the portion of this that is the catalog from there.
And the last thing we're going to talk about today is it's too late to send in an application for this year, but we're hoping to have we're planning to have more in the future, and some of you have already put in applications for this. But the Ira Wallace Seed School, of course, named after Mama Ira, who is the godmother of Ujamaa Seeds and a real leader in this movement, and is speaking here later today virtually. Tomorrow virtually. And Mama Ira's been a great friend and mentor to me and to so many people in the industry. So we have a really amazing group of people coming together to develop this the first course of the Ira Wallace Seed School, which is called Introduction to Ethical Seed Farming. And this is, you're not intended to be able to read all this. We just put it here as a way to show you like how in depth we're planning to make this course, and in the long run, we want people to be able to learn everything they need, other than what can only be taught by experience, to start a seed business, or to grow for another seed company, or to grow for a seed project that's entirely non-commercial as well. And
you can find this at Ujamaa Farms.
Yeah,
you can look for this.
UjamaaFarms.com. The application period has closed for the first cohort, but we will be doing more in the future. You can see we've got folks like Rowan White will be guest teaching, Mama Ira, Collie Graddick from Alabama. Just a really, really awesome crew of people. And having looked at the student applications as well, the people who've applied to be students in this course are amazing. We got almost 200, and we were planning for 50 slots in the first class. It might end up being 70 because we can't cut all of these awesome people. It's virtual. It's going to be virtual, but in the future, we hope to have more in-person things. And in the long-term future, we're hoping to have an actual campus. And this is not an announcement of anything, but this is just one of the dreams that we're one of the paths we're potentially walking down. This property, this field is a place called Harmony Hall in Southern Maryland. It is a big old mansion that is currently owned by the federal government and sitting there empty. It is an empty park, and we've managed to convince local muckety mucks that they should give it to us. And not, they don't give things permanently, but they can give like 30-year $1 a year leases. And so in the long run, we're hoping that this site could be the permanent home of the Ira Wallace Seed School and other Ujamaa programs. They have this old stable building too, but really it's got so much potential. I mean, you can just picture a farm here, right?
It's 65 acres. It's on the Potomac River, just north of Mount Vernon, which was George Washington's home and his home plantation. The community came to us saying that this property should be returned to the people from which it was unceded, the Piscataway people, and to the people who built it, the enslaved people who built it. So we are moving forward with a proposal. So, we need all your support. We need your vision. We need your help. If you're interested, I see a notice about somebody who wants to know about more about it, getting involved with us. On our website, you can learn more about that.
Absolutely. So that is the last slide, and I'll just make one more pitch. We're hoping to get we're hoping to get more of you to some of you to grow for us. We have a few dozen growers around the country already, and we're trying to expand. California offers a climate that the rest of the country doesn't have. So there are a lot of seeds that you can produce here that we can't produce as easily elsewhere. So we're looking for new growers all the time. We're looking for new collaborators. And that's certainly true for Ujamaa. It's also true for Experimental Farm Network, which is my other gig. And so you can reach Bonnetta at that email address or at her phone number. I'm just putting my phone number because my email is a black hole. So call or text if you want to get in touch. And yeah, really, really glad to be here. Thank you all for having us.
Thanks for having us. And whoever has those Ethiopian collard seeds, we need them.
Oh yeah, and I do have a bunch of seeds with me that I'll bust out later. Packeted ones, and then I also have, like, in that bag there, I have like small packets of seeds from the government, things that are rare that I'm looking for, like, people to steward and to increase and grow for years. So please.
And if you're looking for something that's important to your family and your culture, please reach out to us. We'll see what we can do to help. We're pretty good seed detectives. We'll give it our best shot.